Welcome back to Lovely Story Time, everyone. We are so happy to see you again in this exciting journey. Today we will continue to explore parts 7 to 12 of the story, After Breaking Apollo's Heart. Grab your snacks, take a seat, and explore this story together. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with our latest content. Let's get started. Chapter 7, I Won't Love You. Daphne jolted awake, instantly sensing something was wrong. She was floating in mid-air, staring down at her sleeping body and at Apollo, his hand hovering over her neck, a soul out of body. Whatever her state, the golden-haired, blue-eyed god's expression was blank, his icy demeanour far from checking her pulse. If his fingers spread just a bit wider, they'd be in a lethal grip around her throat. Apollo wanted to kill her. Her thoughts froze for a moment before questions surged like a flood. Why, her first instinct screamed that her plot with Eros had been exposed. Where had she slipped up? Had she been followed or spied on unknowingly? But Apollo's shock when she was struck by the arrow didn't seem fake, so something must have happened while she was unconscious, making him suspicious. Had Eros botched it in her soul state? Her mind raced with alarming clarity, conjuring worst-case scenarios. If Daphne died at Apollo's hands, would Eros grant her a new body to start over? A moment's thought told her that was wishful thinking. She had to wake up now. No, that might push Apollo to finish the job. She had to pretend she knew nothing of his murderous intent. At that moment, a cool sensation brushed her neck. A force yanked her downward, her soul snapping back into her body. She couldn't let him suspect. That was her only thought. The sacred, piercing aura cloaking every inch of the god's being made his fingertips feel cold. Daphne couldn't fully suppress her body's instinct, trembling faintly. Her subtle reaction didn't escape Apollo. She was waking. He hesitated, still undecided, when Daphne, eyes closed, deftly pushed his hand away, as if she'd done it countless times in a half-dreaming state, mumbling, "Stop bothering me. Syrinx. Let me sleep a bit longer." Her soft, drawn-out tone was intimate, like whining to a close sibling. Apollo's hand hung in the air, his fingers instinctively curling, grasping at the fleeting, silky sensation of her palm brushing him away. Daphne's half-lidded eyes snapped open, widening in panic as a flush raced up her cheeks. "Apollo, I mistook you for my sister. She always teases me during naps. Truly, I meant no offence. I was checking your pulse," Apollo said flatly, tossing out an excuse. Daphne nodded, feigning trust, and the moment passed without a ripple. She sat up, glancing around, clutching the fabric over her heart. The golden arrow was gone, her clothes and skin unmarked. Biting her lip, she met Apollo's gaze, her face paling as the memory of what happened flooded back. His lips parted, but Daphne spoke faster. "I have something to confess." Apollo raised an eyebrow, surprised. Before coming to Delphi, before meeting Telphusa, I'd already met Eros. The pressure from Zeus's son's stare intensified. Daphne swiftly untied a gold-trimmed ribbon from her braided hair, presenting it with both hands, eyes downcast. "He gave me this ribbon, saying it would keep me safe on my journey and ward off unwanted attention." She spoke only truth, carefully stitched together. She had met Eros long before, and the ribbon was indeed his gift. But her phrasing implied the events happened together, when in reality, she'd received it 2 days ago during their cave meeting. Since she didn't dare lie to a god, she exploited this loophole. Apollo took the ribbon, staring at it without a word. I don't know if he enchanted it, but I felt, I should tell you, in her soul state, free from the arrow's grip, she could scheme without guilt. Now, executing her plan to deceive Apollo, an involuntary ache bloomed in her chest. Eros's golden arrow was terrifying, but this uncontrollable, genuine emotion was exactly what she'd wanted. Whatever sparked Apollo's suspicion, she hoped this preemptive confession would divert his attention. "There's no suspicious magic on this, just a minor protective blessing. Also, gods can track their gifts," Apollo said, letting the ribbon fall back into her palm. "Eros and I have a feud. He vowed to use his arrows to punish me. Whatever his reason for choosing you, you're now struck by his golden arrow, a tool to torment me." Before she could speak, he continued, I'm giving you 2 options. First, return to your father, Ladon, and ask him to confront Eros. Call on your mother, Gaia, to intervene and lessen or nullify the arrow's effect. Meanwhile, I'll deal with Eros again. A faint, bitter smile curved Daphne's lips, but her bright eyes betrayed an unspoken plea. My father dotes on me, but seeing my sisters finding partners, he sometimes nudges me to settle down and start a family. If I go back, he'd probably urge me to find a way to become your "That's impossible." Apollo cut in, his tone absolute. Her lips trembled at his cold declaration, but she held her face steady, refusing to show more. After a pause, she forced a smile. Of course. She cleared her throat, banishing the strain in her voice. What's the second option? I'll allow you to stay in Delphi while the arrow's effect lasts. I have much to do here, but my true self won't always be present. I'll meet you briefly from time to time to ease. He paused awkwardly. The pain the arrow causes your heart. Just meet, she echoed softly. Yes, that's the absolute condition. I won't love you. Daphne looked paler than ever. Apollo seemed to realize that, even without malice. His blunt words stabbed her heart like another arrow. Still, he showed no pity, only stating calmly, "What you feel isn't real love. It's just Eros's cruel trick." She gave a soft, scoffing laugh. "I've never known real love, so I can't compare." Her pale green eyes blazed again, the same fierce flame he'd noticed the first time he saw her, vivid, aggressive. Even Eros's golden arrow couldn't fully dull the thorns beneath her floral facade. Apollo's pupils narrowed. Daphne seemed to read this as displeasure, realizing her tone wasn't deferential enough, and quickly lowered her eyes. "Which do you want me to choose?" His demeanor hardened slightly. "It makes no difference to me." She flicked her gaze up, then down again, that breathtaking spark still lingering in her eyes. Her words slowed, each carrying a double meaning. "You know which I'll choose under the arrow's influence." No response. "Then I choose to stay by your side." Apollo wanted to correct her. It wasn't by his side. He wasn't dragging her everywhere. But Daphne had a knack for seizing the last word. "I'll endure and won't trouble you. But when the arrow's effect fades, when this is over, can you heal me and let me wield the power of the waters?" Apollo's brow furrowed. He couldn't stand her sudden, arrow-fueled obsession, but he also disliked this detached, calculating tone she used to bargain. After a long silence, he said simply, "Fine, I'll try." Daphne pushed off the boulder with both hands, hopping to the ground. "Then I'll start looking for a nearby cave." Apollo raised an eyebrow. "A cave?" She blinked, as if it were obvious. "I need a place to rest at night." After a beat, she laughed lightly, as if just realizing, "You're a god, you don't get tired, but I need sleep to recover my strength." "You could." Apollo started instinctively, then stopped abruptly. Daphne tilted her head, a sly twinkle in her eyes. "I could." His face was blank. "You could ask the god of sleep to make you slumber until the arrow wears off. It just occurred to me." She inwardly scoffed. He definitely hadn't meant to say that. "If I wake and the arrow's fake feelings haven't faded, what then? You must want this resolved quickly." Besides, she couldn't afford to waste time. Eros had been vague about her body's lifespan, and she didn't trust the mischievous love god's mercy, so she stepped back, adopting a sensible tone. "I'll keep my distance. If I annoy you, I'll show up as little as possible." Daphne turned to leave, muttering to herself, "Let's see. I need a cave that doesn't leak, or I'll wake up soaked like last time. And some furs, or the nights will be cold. Can't be too far from here either," Apollo said coolly. "I know what you're thinking. Only my priest can live in my temple." As she opened her mouth, he added ruthlessly, "You're not qualified to be one." "I wasn't aiming to be your priest," Daphne said, lowering her head slightly to match her words, but her tone was candid, lacking the expected fear. Apollo noticed that after the arrow struck, this nymph seemed less afraid of him. Was courage a side effect of love's potion? Or, swayed by her heart, did she naively believe he wouldn't harm her? Unlike Telphusa. She still saw the best in others, too trusting, too unguarded. The memory of her neck's softness flashed through him, skin as fragile as her life, a reed he could snap with a touch. yet she was oblivious to his fleeting intent to kill. A strange emotion rippled through his vast consciousness, leaving brief but deep waves. Apollo nearly lost focus. "If you won't take me in, I'll find a cave," Daphne said, standing tall, as if refusing to be diminished in his eyes. With that, she turned to go. Unlike her light, hopping departure last time, her steps were hurried, as if chased by hounds. She didn't look back, but after a dozen paces, she tilted her face up, taking a deep breath, as if holding back something brimming beneath her eyelids. Apollo knew it was likely an act. He closed his eyes, fingers tightening. "No need to search. I know a suitable place nearby. I'll take you there later." Chapter 8. What's wrong with a little scheming? Daphne rushed forward a few steps before whirling around. "Really?" Apollo's brows furrowed slightly. Displeased. "I don't break my word." Her eyes sparkled, all traces of grievance or sadness gone. After watching him for a moment, she asked eagerly, "So, what should I do next?" He turned his gaze away from her face. "I don't need you to do anything." This time, his rejection didn't dim her spirits. She smiled and plopped back onto the boulder. "You must have other things to handle. Don't mind me. I'll just stay here." Apollo turned away, ignoring her completely. Facing the mountain, he called out, "Guardian of Mount Parnassus, I summon you in the name of Zeus and Leto's son." The divine summons had barely echoed when an androgynous figure appeared on a nearby ridge, cloaked in a hooded cape, voice raspy. "Son of Leto, what do you seek? I've chosen Delphi for my temple of oracles. I ask you to aid the mortals tasked with its construction, guiding them to a nearby quarry so they can fulfill their mission." The mountain god nodded. "That can be done. Also, I wish to borrow your servants to begin building the altar and hall at the temple's heart, work unfit for mortal hands. In return, this region of Parnassus near Delphi will be under my protection. No trouble at all." The mountain god agreed readily. "My servants will arrive soon." "Radiant Apollo, I trust you'll keep your promise." With that, the figure vanished. Almost instantly, the ground quaked as something massive approached. Daphne hugged her knees, staring warily toward the source of the tremor. Boom! Boom! Heavy footsteps echoed, and a towering figure, as tall as the ancient trees and pushed through the branches. The first thing Daphne saw was a foot several paces wide, made of rock and covered in lichen. Another step, and the figure fully emerged. It was a giant formed of stacked stone. The rock giant halted 5 paces from Apollo, lowering its moss-covered face to silently regard the golden-haired god. If the 2 hollows in its stone visage were indeed eyes, "I need hard, fire-resistant stone," Apollo said, unfazed by the servant's appearance, pacing to mark the temple's core. "Enough to build the hall and altar on this foundation. Can you manage the rock giant?" Seemingly mute and slow to react. Took a long moment before nodding. "How long will it take?" Another pause, as if the answer had to travel across a valley. Then the giant slowly turned to look behind. Familiar heavy footsteps rumbled again, this time far louder, startling flocks of mountain birds into flight. A whole troop of rock giants, draped in moss and vines, marched in carrying stone. Daphne's jaw dropped at the sight of these creatures, surpassing any fantasy movie's special effects. Compared to them, her father's mermaid and clamshell servants, though capable of speech, seemed less awe-inspiring, lacking this raw grandeur. The stone-carrying giants were smaller than the first. Likely their leader, Apollo, clearly experienced with such divine servants, divided them into 3 groups, assigning tasks. Soon, they worked methodically. One team cut stone with massive axes, another shaped the blocks, and the largest group filled the foundation's deep trenches. While the giants laboured and Apollo oversaw, Daphne, with nothing to do, propped her chin in her hand, lazily admiring the god's commanding presence. He had to sense her staring but didn't spare her a glance, fully embodying his rejection. She wasn't discouraged. Under Eros's enchanted lens, even the back of his golden head was impossibly gorgeous. While her eyes feasted on the handsome god, her hands stayed busy, spotting a nearby bush bursting with blooms. She gathered an armful of flowers and grasses, piling them on the boulder to weave a flower crown. It was a skill she'd picked up from her nymph sisters. As Gaia's daughter, she could infuse plants with a touch of life, making her crowns resist wilting, a hit among Arcadia's nymphs. A wild rabbit darted past the boulder. Daphne glanced up, then returned to her work. This crown was larger than her usual ones. After a couple of trial runs, she found her rhythm, fingers deftly twisting leaves, vines, and flowers together. Caught up in the task, her gaze finally drifted from Apollo. The god seemed to sense it, glancing at her briefly before looking away. "I'm going to gather more flowers," Daphne announced, hopping off the boulder. Apollo didn't turn. She didn't go far when a pair of long ears poked from the grass. The same rabbit. It turned, watching her, ears twitching, then vanished into the foliage. Acting natural, as if curiosity had taken over, she lifted her skirt and followed the rabbit deeper into the woods. The rabbit stopped in another clearing. Amid fallen logs and blue irises stood a simple shrine of stacked stones. Approaching, Daphne saw moss-covered symbols carved into the hollows, unreadable, their dedicatee unknown. The rabbit leapt onto the shrine, staring at her oddly, almost looking down at her. "Eros," she whispered uncertainly. "It's me," the rabbit replied. It really was him. "Oh, you didn't know rabbits are my sacred animals. I can use them as avatars whenever I please," Eros said in his usual cheerful tone, though it sounded bizarre coming from a rabbit. "Won't you get in trouble being here?" Daphne glanced over her shoulder. The rabbit's whiskers twitched smugly. "No worries. He can't hear us. This was once a sanctuary for me and Aphrodite, abandoned after Python nested nearby. Temples, sanctuaries, even small shrines served as anchors for gods, creating spaces solely theirs." Eros sighed, sadly. Once the Delphi temple is complete, his awareness of this land will sharpen. Even if he doesn't raise this place, he'll closely monitor anything tied to me. We can't use it again. "If you have requests, speak now," Daphne thought, then shook her head. "Nothing urgent for now, but there's something I don't understand. Ask away. I think he had a moment of wanting to kill me, but it doesn't seem like he knows about our plan," she said, touching where Apollo's fingers had grazed her neck. Any ideas why Eros's rabbit ears perked in surprise? Then he laughed. "He's probably jumped to wrong conclusions, suspecting your link to another Olympian." Before she could press, he added, "The less you know about Olympus's peak, the safer and more innocent you are. Fair enough?" But it also meant that a wrong move could confirm Apollo's suspicions, inviting deadly consequences. She wasn't shocked. Telphusa's fate had already shown how ruthless Apollo could be when his divine dignity or position was at stake. Strangling her might be a relatively merciful end. "Ha ha ha. Your face is white as a sheet." The rabbit, infuriatingly, hopped in place, even chasing its tail in a circle. His temper's far from gentle, but as a god who punishes evil and injustice, he can't revel in harming the weak to maintain his authority. Eros paused meaningfully. But if anger blinds his eyes, he might do something even he'd regret. Daphne closed her eyes, breathing deeply. "I'll keep that in mind." Eros shifted gears. "So, how do you feel? Can you stick to the plan?" "Your golden arrow is working," she said, pressing her chest. "Things are going smoothly so far. Out of pity or duty, he's letting me stay in Delphi and will find me a place to live. With the first step done, the next ones will be easier. No, I mean, can you hold firm, not soften or waver because of my arrow?" Daphne paused, then smiled. "Whether it's my true heart or the plan's needs, I want his love more than anything, playing pitiful or sweet. What's wrong with a little scheming to pursue the one you love? As for what happens after he loves me, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it." Eros said nothing. She sensed a cruel amusement in his silence, as if he were watching her flounder from afar. Finally, the love god sighed. "A bonus tip: the arrow struck this body, so in your soul state, you're briefly free from my power's grip. If you need me, visit my sanctuary." His words cut off. The rabbit's ears shot up, the strange glint in its eyes fading. Daphne tensed instinctively. She glanced back. The forest swayed gently, no sign of trouble. Turning again, the rabbit stared blankly at her. Then, with a startled whisker twitch, leapt into the grass and vanished. A chill crawled up her spine. She turned slowly. This time, she wasn't alone. Apollo stood at the edge of the iris patch, watching her expressionlessly. His gaze lingered on the abandoned shrine, then fixed on her, his voice as cold and oppressive as his demeanour. "What are you doing here?" Chapter 9, short-term goal, make him break his word for her. Her nerves stretched to the breaking point. Daphne felt oddly numb. She even managed to smile. I couldn't help but notice this patch of irises. Their colours are stunning. Don't you think? Apollo's gaze dropped silently to her empty hands. "Okay," she sighed, turning slightly to gesture at the stone shrine. "I was drawn by the irises. Sure, but then I found Eros's shrine. And..." She bit her lip, her voice softening. "I couldn't resist praying to him." "What did you pray to Eros for?" "I begged him to show me mercy, to take back the golden arrow in my body, or just shoot me with a lead one so I'd stop loving you." Apollo's stern expression carried a warning. "I can tell if you're lying." In other words, he could only discern her honesty. He hadn't overheard her conversation with Eros. Daphne let herself shiver, as if buckling under the god's pressure. After a pause, she said, "I pleaded with Eros to enlighten me. I don't know why he chose me, but since it's done, maybe he'd help me just a bit, make you show a sliver of affection instead of piercing me with that icy northwind attitude. Leto's son, with eyes that could pierce the future, would detect lies. Her tactic, like before, was to play word games, blurring timelines and cause and effect with fragments of truth woven into deception. She had just asked Eros for answers. She still didn't know why the love god picked her soul from countless others. And during their earlier planning, Eros had offered her advice. It wasn't the full truth, but it wasn't a lie. The tension around Apollo eased slightly, though his expression stayed cold. "Did Eros answer you?" Daphne glanced back at the shrine, scoffing. "Your attitude toward me hasn't changed a bit, so clearly he ignored me. Don't pray to Eros in secret again. If he tries to contact you, report it to me immediately and don't agree to anything on your own. Otherwise, all my promises to you are void." Apollo's words came in a hard, unyielding string of commands. That told her she'd passed this hurdle. For now. She bowed submissively, hiding the involuntary relaxation of her spine. "As you wish." After a moment, she looked up and saw Apollo still there. Cautiously, she asked, "Do you have any other orders?" His brow arched, his tone sharp. "What are you still doing here?" I'll grab some irises and head back in the end." Daphne, under Apollo's watchful eye, gathered a large bundle of vibrant blue irises and followed him back to the temple construction site. After escorting her back, Apollo resumed his aloof silence, not sparing a word as he returned to overseeing the rock giants. As soon as he turned away, Daphne's legs buckled, nearly collapsing, her strength drained. It felt like she'd just sprinted for her life. Which, in a way, she had a deadly gamble with her second life as the stake. Clutching her irises, Daphne leaned against the boulder to steady herself, then climbed back up and resumed weaving flower crowns. By dusk, the altar had taken shape, and 2 walls of the central hall were rising. Apollo, not wanting to overwork the mountain god's servants, instructed them to return at sunrise. Meanwhile, as the rock giants finished their tasks, Daphne had a stack of 12 oversized flower crowns. As the giants began to lumber away with heavy thuds, she slung the crowns over her arm and hopped down. "Wait." She approached the lead giant, holding up the largest crown and craning her neck. "Will you accept this gift, a thank you for your work on Apollo's temple?" "Oh, but if you don't like it." "No worries." The rock giant, as slow as ever, took ages to respond. Finally, it bent down, extending its massive hands toward her feet. She placed the crown in its palms, but the giant didn't move. Daphne waited, puzzled, glancing at its unreadable stone face, then back at Apollo. "It wants you to stand in its hands," he said. She pointed at herself, surprised. Me, the giant, after a delayed beat, nodded sluggishly. Since Apollo didn't object, it seemed safe enough. Daphne climbed into the giant's hands. As its fingers thicker than her entire body curled slightly, she flinched, heart racing. This size difference meant it could crush her effortlessly. but the giant only raised its knuckles like a gentle barrier to keep her from falling. Facing such a colossal creature without fear was a lie, but her trepidation quickly melted under curiosity and excitement. The mountain god's servants, despite their rugged appearance, were remarkably gentle. The giant lifted her carefully to its forehead, moving with deliberate caution. Daphne understood. She stepped to the edge of its palm, stretched her arms, and placed the oversized crown on its head. It fit perfectly, unlikely to fall unless it shook wildly. She glanced back at Apollo on the ground. The young god stood at the clearing's edge, his golden hair glowing in the afternoon sun. Too dazzling. She blinked to make out his expression. He watched her, his face an unreadable mask. Their eyes met, and he didn't look away, as if she were just part of the scenery, a tree swaying its branches at him. Avoiding eye contact could be a good sign in a tug-of-war of attraction, but he showed no hint of that. If anything, the shrine incident likely made him warier, more distant. A pang of disappointment hit her, but she quickly rallied. The golden arrow's pull was real, as were the hope and heartbreak it sparked. She didn't need her soul-state detachment to feel these emotions. They didn't stop her from planning her next move. Her strategy was to lean into her feelings, embrace the pain and joy bravely, analyze and scheme coldly, and express herself honestly yet tactfully. If Eros's task was a project, her ultimate goal was Apollo's love. Her short-term goal, make him break his word for her once, then twice, then countless times. Her immediate aim was to live in his temple. To reach that, she needed to become more than a passing flower in his eyes, just a little more. As for her approach, she'd take a subtler route to capture his attention. Daphne had a plan. While she stood lost in thought, the rock giant patiently waited. She murmured an apology, turning to face it. Instead of setting her down, it carried her to its fellow giants, thoughtfully lifting her to each one's head. They dipped their stone faces to let her crown them one by one. The gratitude and warmth from these lesser spirits soothed the sting of Apollo's indifference. The fairy tale-like experience was magical but brief. Back on the ground, Daphne looked up. White, red, pale yellow, purple. Each crown's colours unique, no two alike. Seeing the rock giants adorned with her creation sparked an odd, satisfying pride. Apollo's gaze swept over the giants' crowns, his eyes narrowing briefly as if noticing something. His expression quickly returned to calm. "You may leave." The giants turned silently, vanishing into the forest as they'd come. The leader carefully held its crown to avoid branches snagging it. Daphne smiled. She tucked her right arm behind her back, her left hand brushing through her hair, ready to say something casual to Apollo, but their eyes locked. He was staring at her raised left arm, now bare of any crowns. Oh, and a small iris petal clung to the inside of her arm. She flicked it off casually, then hid her left arm behind her too. Facing him, she said earnestly, "I hope you don't mind me giving the giants gifts without asking. I didn't mean to overstep or claim any role. I'll be staying in Delphi a while and benefiting from their work, so I wanted to do something." Apollo's voice was cold. "No need to explain so much. I don't care about trivial things like flower crowns." Despite his words, his slightly tightened lips betrayed a flicker of displeasure. Daphne pretended not to notice, keeping her bright smile, hands clasped behind her as she stepped closer. "If you think my crowns are decent, I'd love to offer you one. It'd be prettier than the others, more fitting." "No need." Apollo cut her off. His refusal was too quick, almost suspicious, as if he'd anticipated her offer and shut it down decisively. He turned, expressionless, and walked back to the budding temple. Daphne stood still, silent for a moment, then rubbed her face with one hand, muttering clearly enough to be heard, "I figured you wouldn't like it." Her fingers behind her back released, and the final crown slipped past her skirt, falling. It was indeed lovelier than the giants' crowns, woven with nearly all the vibrant blue irises she'd gathered, their rich hue matching Leto's sun's azure eyes. It dropped into the tall grass with barely a sound, almost none. "I'm going to get some water," she called louder, walking into the forest without looking back. No response followed. Her hurried nymph footsteps faded. Moments later, someone approached. A hand, faintly glowing, reached into the grass, deftly retrieving the abandoned iris crown. Chapter 10. The tips of his eyelashes brushed her damp fingers. Daphne wandered aimlessly for a while, then paused and looked back. Wings fluttered as birds rose from the treetops, soaring over the forest bathed in the golden glow of dusk, returning to their nests. Silence settled, heavy with an unspoken melancholy. No one followed her. She tilted her head back, sighing softly. She couldn't expect Apollo to chase after her, but she hoped he'd at least notice the iris crown she'd deliberately left behind. Otherwise, her subtle manoeuvring was for nothing. Unknowingly, she'd reached a deep pool fed by a mountain spring. Delphi's dolphin-shaped spring was elsewhere, another spring nearby. Why hadn't Apollo mentioned it? Daphne settled on a large rock by the water, deciding to gather her thoughts before returning. Truthfully, her progress was dismal. Flirting, gestures of affection, nothing worked. Apollo was infuriatingly unyielding. She tilted her head, studying her reflection in the water. The pool was dark and clear, faithfully mirroring the sky in her face. This body's beauty, while not Helen of Troy legendary, was far from ordinary model or movie star material in the modern world. Given Apollo's lofty standards, maybe she just wasn't his type. The girl in the water met her gaze, and Daphne gave a wry smile. "Hey, Daphne!" The reflection returned a helpless grin. Then, the smile faded, and the mirrored Daphne's face went blank. Startled, she touched her cheek. The girl in the water didn't move, just stared. A chill hit her. This was straight out of a horror movie. The pool was trouble. She needed to leave now, but her body betrayed her. Standing, stepping back, even lowering her arm was impossible. "Is this what you want?" a strange, melodic female voice whispered, so close it felt like breath would graze her neck. Goosebumps erupted, torn between turning to check and fearing a horror movie-style jump scare. Sadly, she couldn't even turn. "Who are you?" she tried to ask, but her tongue was sluggish, her throat mute. The voice giggled, suddenly identical to Daphne's. "I'm you. Silly. How could—" Her thoughts fractured, unsure whose voice continued. "I'm you, but with what you can't have. Don't believe me. Look, don't look." But her eyes had a mind of their own. The water's Daphne beckoned, and another figure appeared, Apollo. He watched her for a moment, raised an eyebrow in mock exasperation, and leaned down to kiss her forehead. The mirrored Daphne seized the moment, cradling his face, her thumb brushing his lower lip. Apollo's eyes narrowed, and he grabbed her wrists, pulling her closer. Soft kisses trailed from her forehead, down her nose, and— wait, hold on, was this really Apollo, so bold and passionate you can find out yourself? A heavy, soul-snapping plunge, like falling from a great height into a solid embrace. Her lips were enveloped by something soft. No, not just her lips. Cold water engulfed her, alive and willful, its omnipresent tendrils crushing the bubbles escaping her mouth and nose. Daphne snapped awake. Too late. Somehow. She'd been in the pool for a while, her breath nearly gone. She thrashed, but the eerie current shackled her limbs, sapping her strength. She forced her eyes up, her vision blurred, catching only faint, green-tinted light flickering like a storm-battered lantern. No, she didn't want to die. Not again. With all her might, she reached out, a desperate plea or farewell to touch that distant light. The light flared, like a star plummeting from the sky. Whether illusion or reality, a radiant glow enveloped her. A strong hand yanked her upward, and suddenly she could breathe. Water stung her eyes, blinding her momentarily. All she heard was her own coughing, violent enough to tear her lungs apart. Her soaked robes weighed her down, her knees trembling, her body collapsing uncontrollably. She grabbed for something, her fingers brushing cold, hard metal studded with gems. As her vision cleared, she realized she was clutching a golden, gem-encrusted belt. Her gaze travelled up, locking with the blue eyes of the golden-haired young god, Apollo. Her face paled, and she instinctively covered his eyes. "Don't look at the water. It's dangerous." "I know," Apollo said, his tone unreadable. He blinked, the tips of his eyelashes brushing her damp fingers. So this was a god's eyelashes, surprisingly human. Daphne froze, then quickly pulled her hand back. Water droplets slid from his wet brow, tracing his inner eye, but they could never be mistaken for tears. The son of Leto would never cry. A half-beat of silence. Then it hit her. She'd just smeared water all over the great Apollo's face. "What's wrong with you?" "Oh no, he was mad," Daphne stammered. I didn't mean to. Please forgive me. I just Apollo cut in, patient but firm." "I meant, how did you nearly drown?" Her voice weakened. "I don't know." I looked at my reflection, then heard a creepy voice. My body stopped listening to me, and then I saw you. She clamped her lips shut, cutting off the rest. "Then you saw me." Daphne fell silent. "What's with this pool? I never noticed it before," Apollo asked. "Only those tormented by love can find the path to this pool," came a reply. Daphne turned, spotting the Parnassus mountain god she'd seen before. The elder spoke unhurriedly, recounting the pool's origin. When white-armed Hera learned Leto carried the king of gods' child, she hurled her mirror down in rage. A shard of its surface fell from Olympus's snowy peak to my mountains, forming this sourceless, ever-full pool. This shard carries divine wrath and resentment, luring passers-by tormented by love with illusions, drawing them unknowingly into the water. It hasn't been here long, but many lost souls have drowned, boarding Charon's ferry to the underworld in a daze. In other words, the pool was tied to Apollo's birth. Apollo was silent, then turned back to Daphne. But as a river god's daughter, why would you? He stopped, realization dawning, his eyes flickering. Daphne gave a wry smile, admitting openly, "I can't wield water's power or breathe underwater like my sisters. That's why I so desperately want." She sneezed, cutting herself off. Her wet clothes clung to her, dripping, and an evening breeze made her shiver, hugging herself. She missed Apollo's glance. In this world, women tied their first belt only on their wedding day. For unmarried girls, a long chiton was secured under the chest with a fabric strip looped from the shoulders. The front was pleated with extra fabric to drape naturally, concealing the suggestive strip. But now, as Daphne hugged herself, the pleats bunched up, exposing the inch-wide band. Above was the curve of her arms, below the faint hue and line of her waist through the soaked fabric. Apollo's gaze snapped away almost instantly, but his infallible archer's eyes had already seen too much in that fleeting moment. His vast sea of consciousness froze, and he couldn't name the thoughts that surfaced, only to shatter into foam before fully forming. He yanked off his cloak and tossed it at her without looking. Daphne, slow to react, realized he wasn't carelessly discarding it but lending it to her. Apollo turned to the mountain god. "She's the daughter of Gaia and Ladon. As a child of the Earth Mother too, find her new clothes." The mountain god paused. "I can't conjure a maiden's robe on the spot." Apollo's irritation was palpable. Even if nymphs are rare near Delphi, there must be some in Parnassus's other corners. "I don't want to bother Artemis over this. Your cloak is warm. I'll light a fire and dry my clothes," Daphne interjected cautiously. Apollo's cool glance slid to her. "That's fine, but I can't guarantee the mirror shard's curse won't linger in the water-soaked fabric. Couldn't the god of purification just cleanse it?" She didn't say it. She didn't buy that an Olympian god couldn't produce a single outfit. Likely, wary of the golden arrow, he'd lent his cloak but refused to fuel her hopes further. Yet he wouldn't even toss a quick holy light, insisting on delegating. Daphne clutched the cloak, lowering her head. This torment called love was her choice, a wager she was ready to keep paying, armor to clear her suspicions, and a weapon to advance on Apollo. It was only day one. She couldn't rush. She could endure. Apollo and the mountain god kept talking, but Daphne, wrestling the arrow's negative pull, had no energy to listen. Only when her three-syllable name repeated did she realize Apollo was calling her. The mountain god was gone. "Yes, what is it?" Her face was alarmingly pale, somehow frailer than when she'd been pulled ashore. Apollo's brow furrowed faintly, and he pressed her shoulder. Sacred light enveloped her, shimmering then fading. The burning in her throat from choking eased, and her body warmed. "But that was all," Daphne said softly. "I'm a bit tired. Can you take me to a place to rest? A nap will fix me." She planned to take a few wobbly steps to show weakness, then naturally ask for a princess carry. But her vision blurred, and she was already scooped up horizontally. Her surprise must have been obvious, as Apollo opened his mouth to explain. Daphne cut in. "I know. It's just pity for the weak. No other meaning. Don't worry, I won't read into it." Apollo's lips pressed tight, swallowing his unspoken words. His hold was noticeably awkward, minimizing contact. Daphne felt more like cargo than a person, stiff and uncomfortable. She squirmed to adjust, then again, and once more, until Apollo's steps faltered, his gaze dropping to her. "This feels like I'll fall any second." "It's not comfortable," she said. "I won't let you fall." She studied his face, pressing gently. "But I'm not comfortable." So she inched closer to his chest, cautiously reaching out, pausing before touching his shoulder and looking up. "May I?" Apollo looked away, resuming his stride. Daphne took it as permission. Placing one hand on his shoulder, he didn't stop or glance at her. Emboldened, she slid her other arm around his neck from behind. At this distance, no subtle shift could hide from either. Yet Apollo showed no reaction to the intimate contact. At least, Daphne felt none. Was this the mark of a god to him? It might be like a flower stem brushing her skin when she held a bouquet. But even in a mythical world, flowers didn't usually speak. "I know you'd save anyone who fell in that pool." "But I'm glad you saved me again," she said, her voice softening, her lips nearing his earlobe as if sharing a secret meant only for him. "Thank you. Even without Eros's golden arrow, I think I'd have fallen for you because of this." Chapter 11, Drawing Breath. Is that so? Apollo's response to her confession was flat, as if she'd merely stated a trivial fact. The wind was strong, the sun was setting, obvious, but irrelevant. Daphne wasn't disheartened. She hadn't expected a real reaction. Falling first, confessing love first, was often seen as a disadvantage. Maybe it was, but not for her and Apollo. Her "I love you" wasn't the fruit of a seed that sprouted and grew. It was the seed itself. She'd repeat those words to him endlessly. She wasn't lying, and saying it again wouldn't cost her anything. When he started wondering where her heart would turn once the golden arrow faded, that's when her real turn would begin. "I didn't get to ask earlier. How did you find me?" Daphne paused, probing lightly. Only those tormented by love can find that pool. So, Apollo cut off her speculation coolly. "The mountain god sent word you were in danger and guided me." "And you rushed to save me?" She lowered her head with a soft laugh, as if overjoyed by the thought. Apollo didn't respond. "Why did the mountain god tell you first? It would have been faster to save her directly. There are other Olympian temples on Parnassus. Guardians of mountains and waters, like your father, usually stay neutral, avoiding offending any gods." Daphne's eyes flickered. "So stopping the pool's hunting would offend the queen. You could say that." She studied Apollo's face. "But you're not afraid of offending her?" He raised an eyebrow. "My existence is an offence to her. Only he could deliver such a declaration so calmly." "Classic Apollo," he asked abruptly. "If Hera learned of you, she might target you cruelly." "Are you afraid?" Daphne answered frankly. "I don't think the queen would bother with me. You don't love me, so hurting me would be pointless." Apollo looked at her, silent. Seizing the moment, she threw out a bold question. "If I died because of you, would you feel sad for me?" His blue-wrapped pupils contracted, his tone icing over. "That's a foolish question." She didn't back down. Her fingers tightened on his neck, each word deliberate. "I can't stop loving you, but I can try to love you without losing myself, causing you less trouble. I know I mean nothing to you. My life or death wouldn't make you sad." The halo behind Apollo flared, its terrifying pressure freezing the air. "Don't presume to guess my thoughts." She trembled but met his piercing gaze. "Don't be afraid. Fear won't help." She was after a being like him, after a clear, audible breath. She continued, calmly yet almost arrogantly. "No need to get angry. It's just a hypothetical. Besides, Delphi's under your protection. With your power, I'm sure I won't face danger here again." Pausing, she asked innocently, Did I say something wrong? Silence fell, the forest birds holding their breath for Apollo's reaction. As long as you stop wandering into monster lairs or cursed ponds, he finally said, his tone sharp with mockery, the oppressive aura quietly dissipating. Daphne nodded, beaming. I'll try my best. Apollo ignored her. After a while, she spoke again. Where's your Pegasus on standby? I can fly without it. She glanced at the darkening forest and sky, her unspoken question clear. Why walk instead of fly? Surely not to hold her longer. Apollo? Misreading her, said icily. You're too weak to handle high-speed flight right now. A god's body was incomprehensible to others, a vast presence, unless a god deliberately included someone in their domain, sharing their breath. A nymph would only sense alien cold or heat, instinctively awed. Apollo was no exception. His chest offered no warmth. Beneath his cloak, her wet clothes clung, the chill seeping into her bones. She was nearing her limit, shivering again. A god's domain only embraced their favoured. She couldn't ask Apollo to include her. She'd already towed a dangerous line, and requesting a fire to dry her clothes would likely be refused. So she closed her eyes, curling inward, praying the journey would end soon. Daphne grew drowsy. In what felt like a dream, something opened to her. Indescribable warmth enveloped her, banishing the damp cold. It resembled Apollo's healing glow, but was softer, more enduring, like bathing in a sacred sea. She wanted to see its source, but her eyelids were leaden. What a nice dream, she thought hazily, letting go of her last thread of clarity. Daphne's trembling was impossible to hide. Apollo wasn't sure how fragile nymphs were, but he could tell her condition was poor. It took a moment to realize she was shaking from cold. Cold was alien to Apollo, a concept he understood but never felt. A god's imperishable body needed only periodic ambrosia and nectar to sustain power, preventing dormancy. Hunger and thirst didn't exist as sensations. Likewise, gods didn't feel seasonal or diurnal shifts, only extremes, like Helios's sun chariot flames gave them pause. To Apollo, Hera's mirror-shard pool was just water laced with a curse. He'd cleansed its taint from Daphne, but for a nymph vulnerable to death, that wasn't enough. Without his intervention, she'd be dead, harsh as it sounded. Her near-fatal mishap cleared some suspicions. She wasn't Hera's pawn, at least. Olympian gods followed few rules, but their vengeance had cause. Neither Hera nor Apollo would let innocents die for their ends. Apollo began to question himself. Had he been too harsh with Daphne, too wary of unseen enemies? If she fell ill from cold, it'd be another hassle, tangling their messy ledger further. So he briefly opened his domain's edge, letting her draw breath from him. He regretted it almost instantly. Her soft, boneless body, like algae seeking sunlight, clung tighter. Her arms, already around his neck, wound closer, sparking an absurd sense of suffocation, despite his lack of need for breath. Her cheek pressed into his neck, rubbing boldly, her lips letting slip a contented hum. She was practically a cat, treating him like a heater and purring in her sleep. If she were awake, he could accuse her of scheming, but these small movements were clearly unconscious. Apollo sped up, covering the remaining distance quickly. We're here. He closed his domain. The warmth vanished, and Daphne jolted awake with a shiver. Her clothes were somehow dry. She scanned her surroundings, eyes widening. They stood on a sunlit slope, a freshly cleared patch amid the trees, the air thick with the scent of earth. A simple but spacious stone house sat in the clearing centre, its thatched roof freshly laid, clearly just built. This is... Still groggy, she was slow to process. Apollo, for some reason, wore a sour expression. I promised you a place to stay. I thought it to be a cave. The thought slipped out. The mountain god's servants built it to thank you. Daphne hopped down, stepping closer to admire the house's towering doorway. It's huge, just for me. They're not skilled at building small structures. Should I thank the mountain god? No need, came the mountain god's voice, startling her as the elder appeared behind her without warning. Tone unchanged. My servants only follow orders. Apollo's temple twitched, and he shot the god a cold glare as if in warning. The elder's face was hidden by their hood, expression unreadable. Daughter of Ladin. I bring clothes gifted by Gaia." Daphne blinked, hurriedly accepting the fabric from the elder's hands. "This robe will protect you, letting you run like the wind across the dark earth. Only divine weapons can pierce it, sufficient to shield you from most dangers. Great Mother, thank you for your protection." Daphne bowed sincerely toward the earth, then turned to the mountain god. "And thank you." The elder seemed to smile, vanishing like mist. "If I may, I'll change inside." With Apollo's nod, Daphne entered the stone house. Though large, its layout was simple, split into 2 rooms by a woolen tapestry hanging from the rafters. She carried the new clothes, heading to the inner room. But her steps froze past the curtain. By the window stood a stone bench piled with thick furs and a small table, both plain and unadorned, in the rock giant style. On the table lay a crown, the one woven with blue irises, the one she'd abandoned in the grass. Daphne stepped out and saw Apollo. He hadn't left, gazing at a crescent moon perched on low branches. Her footsteps were light, but he turned instantly. She approached, feeling his gaze sweep over her from head to toe, lingering inexplicably on her hem. Apollo seemed mildly fastidious, so she assumed something dirty clung there, lifting her skirt slightly to check. Gaia's gifted gown was moonlight white, a simple chiton, soft and airy as clouds. Plain at a glance, it revealed faint silver patterns only in motion. The pristine hem gleamed as she lifted it, free of stains or mud. "Apollo." "Nothing," he said, quick and decisive, suspiciously so. Daphne pursed her lips, puzzled, but didn't press. Even if she had, he wouldn't answer. The white hem, rising with her step, shimmered with unique silver light, a familiar sight. He couldn't mistake it. In the 2 prophetic visions that pierced his divine mind, he'd chased this very hem. It was almost certain the figure he saw, the one he pursued, was Daphne. He foresaw her leaving him. Chapter 12, Apollo's Ideal Type. Apollo's expression shifted. Daphne was baffled, clueless about what minefield she'd unwittingly stepped into. "I've placed markers with my sigil around this clearing," he said, quickly averting his gaze, his tone formal. "Stay here, and you'll be safe. Thank you." Her docile response earned a muffled scoff from Apollo's throat. He turned to leave. Daphne took a step after him. He stopped instantly, whipping around, his eyes cold and brimming with warning. She froze, pierced by an icy shard, instinct pinning her in place, too scared to move closer. The prickly distance felt like their first meeting all over again, her 2 days of effort reduced to nothing. Clutching her skirt, she forced calm into her voice. "When can I see you again? May I visit the temple tomorrow? Where you go, what you do, what happens to you, that's your freedom. It's none of my concern." With that frigid remark, Apollo vanished into the moonlit sky. Daphne stood before the stone house for a moment, lifting her skirt to check again. Still no flaw to be found. Defeated. She slumped her shoulders and returned inside. The flower crown still lay quietly on the table. She sighed. She'd thought the crown had softened Apollo, prompting the rock giants to build this house as a small kindness. But a god's moods were more fickle than the weather. One moment he'd saved her. The next he acted like he never wanted to see her again. What was going on utterly baffling. No matter how unreasonable he was, she had to press on. The next afternoon, Daphne headed to the Delphi temple. The rock giant's construction pace was astonishing. The central hall's 4 walls were already up, taking shape. Most striking was the statue before the hall, perched on a 3-tiered pedestal. The unpainted marble figure resembled Apollo himself. Seated on a high tripod, he bore a bow and arrows, one hand holding a scepter, the other a shallow sacrificial wine bowl. A swan, neck arched, rested at his feet. To see Leto's son's face, visitors had to crane their necks. The statue's eyes, yet to be painted, had blank sockets that amplified its cold, solemn aura, inspiring awe. It was as if the god gazed through marble pupils, his lowered eyes calmly and impartially judging each worshipper. No favoritism, no personal ties. You're just in time. Apollo's voice rang out behind her. Daphne, mid-thought about the statue's craftsmanship, gasped, hand flying to her chest. Having just studied the statue, seeing the real Apollo stunned her. No matter how handsome or lifelike the statue, it couldn't capture the raw impact of a god's presence. Apollo exuded an aggressive allure, even standing still, his beauty overwhelmed, stealing breath in a fleeting daze. Her momentary pause didn't escape his sharp notice, admiration and instinctive affection clear in her eyes. His brow furrowed in displeasure, and she lowered her head. "Praise be to your divine works. Do you have any orders?" He stepped aside, subtly widening the gap between them. "I'm leaving Delphi for a few days." After a pause, he added, "The temple needs priests and attendants to manage offerings. I'm guiding the chosen mortals here." His words made it clear she couldn't ask to tag along. This was his divine duty, and she was, at best, a guest under his mercy, unqualified for his affairs. So she flashed a smile. "May you succeed in all you do." Apollo gave a curt acknowledgement. She offered eagerly, "Please allow me to bring fresh flowers to your statue daily." A brief, distant reply. "Fine. If something happens, may I pray to you by name, do as you wish, but whether I hear or answer is my choice." Overnight. Apollo's demeanour had become impregnable, constantly reinforcing the chasm between their statuses, an unbreachable wall. "Is there anything I can do while you're gone?" His face was blank. "No." Daphne nearly ran out of words. A suffocating silence followed. Apollo held his cold stare, as if testing what futile pleasantries she'd muster, or waiting for her to give up. This wasn't the aloof indifference of their first encounter. Daphne sensed a deliberate harshness in his attitude. She'd even switched back to her old clothes to avoid triggering him with Gaia's gift. What had she done wrong, finally? She forced a smile. "Then I'll pray daily for your swift return." The conversation was dead. Daphne quietly stepped aside, planning to sit on yesterday's boulder and watch the rock giants work. But the audience seats were occupied. Python's reign had kept nymphs away from Delphi's nearby woods. Now, days after the serpent's death, word had spread, and Apollo's temple construction drew attention. Nymphs from other parts of Parnassus had gathered. Most feared Apollo, watching from the shade. But 4 or 5 bolder ones sat where Daphne had, giggling softly. As she approached, the mountain nymphs fell silent. The awkward hush of being caught gossiping had a distinct flavour. Their flickering yet unaverted gazes told Daphne they'd been talking about her. Golden-haired sister. "You're new," said a chestnut-haired nymph, clearly the group's leader, breaking the ice. "I'm from Arcadia, daughter of the river god Ladon." Arcadia. That's far. Daphne trotted out her excuse about seeking a cure for her defect, earning a chorus of half-sincere sighs. The chestnut-haired nymph's curious stare was the boldest. You were just talking to Leto's son. About that, they didn't know about Eros's golden arrow. For a moment, Daphne was tempted. In her past life, she'd followed celebrity and royal scandals, even brushing shoulders with media insiders due to her job. This was a chance to shape the narrative. Spilling the truth that she'd been caught in Apollo and Eros's feud would spread like wildfire. Nymphs were social, news travelling fast among them. Apollo would have to respond publicly, or risk whispers that the archer god lacked compassion, a reputation beyond his control. Whether he cared about nymphs or gods' opinions was another question. She glanced at Apollo, beyond the rock giants. The mortal prince from before had arrived to build the temple, trailed by slaves and carts laden with wood and tools. A trembling crowd knelt before the god's radiance. Apollo likely had no time to notice the nymph's chatter, but Daphne chose a different story. "No, I wandered into Python's lair before and was saved by glorious Apollo." "I'm staying briefly," she paused, feigning a maiden's shy confession. To express my gratitude, the nymphs exchanged knowing, sympathetic looks. Daphne gave a wry smile. "Sadly, there's little I can do for him. Even among Zeus's children, none match his beauty." But the chestnut-haired nymph lowered her voice, beckoning Daphne closer. On his way to Delphi, many sisters smitten with his looks tried to chat, inviting him to rest in their groves or sip nectar. He turned them all down. All of them. "Every time," she said, shaking her head, her voice dropping further. "Leto's son is young. probably clueless about romance. Don't feel bad. Another nymph rolled her eyes. Doesn't like brunettes, redheads, or blondes. What kind of goddess would it take to catch his eye? Daphne thought to herself. I'd love to know Apollo's ideal type too. A shy mountain nymph, silent until now, offered a theory. His twin sister Artemis, noble Hestia, daughter of Rhea, and grey-eyed Athena all swore to remain chaste. Maybe he plans to follow his sister. The chestnut-haired nymph burst out laughing. No way. Yeah, a male god staying chaste, never heard of it. The wild idea sent the nymphs into a giggling fit. Daphne managed a faint smile, not joining in. Sometimes a god's stray comment or this kind of harmless laughter was enough to snap her out of her role as Ladon's daughter. The arrow's emotional tide seemed to vanish, letting her view this world she couldn't fully belong to with an outsider's cold clarity, strengthening her resolve. She had to leave this place at any cost. The nymph's chatter continued. He glanced at us just now. Shh, I told you, you're too loud. I didn't say anything disrespectful, seeing Daphne's silence. The chestnut-haired nymph hooked her arm warmly. Don't be sad. On Parnassus's southeast side, there's a stunningly beautiful boy, son of the river god Cephissus, named Narcissus. We were planning to invite him to hang out. Come with us, Narcissus. The name rang a bell, racking her sparse Greek mythology knowledge. Daphne connected Narcissus to Narcissist, the beautiful youth who fell for his reflection, died of a broken heart, and became a daffodil. Honestly, she was curious just how gorgeous Narcissus could be. If it's not too far, I promised to offer flowers to Apollo's statue, so I can't be gone long. Apollo was away for days, seemingly indifferent to her actions, and she was quick on her feet. A detour shouldn't be a problem, right? It's less than half a day to Narcissus. Come on. The nymphs fell silent, a different, tense quiet settling in. Daphne, composure regained, blinked in confusion, following their gazes. Apollo, having issued orders to the mortals, was walking toward them, expressionless. Hiss. Let's go quick. Quick. Like kids caught misbehaving. The mountain nymphs giggled, scampering to the shade, dragging Daphne along. She froze, too slow to break free. Come out. Apollo didn't enter the woods, his flat voice delivering a single command. Daphne blinked, a shiver running through her. Uh-oh. Was he about to cliff-toss every nymph who gossiped about him? No way. Right sensing trouble. The other nymphs vanished into the shade using their powers, including the one who'd just warmly invited her to see the pretty boy. No need for her to spread rumours. Apollo's cold reputation was about to take another hit. The air grew eerily still. Apollo's audible inhale cut through. Daphne stepped from the shade, striving for nonchalance. You called me.